What happens when a CEO goes undercover at his own salad bar and watches a manager explode over something as simple as an employee sitting down? 7 years ago, Sterling Grant bought a struggling salad bar chain with 20 locations spread across the Midwest. Back then, it was barely staying afloat. Bad reviews, high turnover, and bland menus. Sterling poured everything into rebuilding it. He updated ingredients, raised hourly wages, and pushed for a culture of respect and teamwork. For a while, it worked. Sales went up. Staff seemed happier. But lately, customer complaints were creeping back in. Not about the food, but about the service. I walked in, no greeting. Girl looked like she was afraid to speak. Place looked clean. But the staff? Miserable. Sterling had stopped visiting locations 2 years ago. He'd handed off more day-to-day oversight to district managers and focused on expansion. Maybe too much expansion. Something was being lost. He decided it was time to see things for himself. Sterling picked one of the locations that hadn't drawn much attention, Store 14 in Bloomington. No major complaints, no glowing praise. Just quiet. That worried him more than anything. He spent 3 days crafting his disguise. A little gray in the beard, glasses, a dyed buzz cut, and a name tag that read Stan. He applied online through a temp agency the company used to fill in shifts. Since most of the original staff had turned over, no one there had ever met him in person. Store 14 had gone through 3 managers in 5 years. The current one, Kevin, had only been there 8 months. When Sterling walked into the back entrance on a rainy Tuesday morning, no one gave him a second look. "You the new temp?" a tall guy asked, not looking up from his phone. "Yeah. First day," Sterling said. "Cool. Go see Kevin up front. He'll set you up." Kevin was thin, wiry, and fast-talking. He barely looked at Sterling before handing him a green apron and pointing to an empty prep table. "Cut cucumbers. Fast. Don't waste. No welcome. No intro. Just orders." By noon, Sterling's arms ached. He was working next to a quiet young woman named Hope. She looked maybe 22, with dark circles under her eyes and fingers wrapped in band-aids. She didn't talk much, but when she did, she was kind. "You new?" she asked, passing him a bin of chopped romaine. "Yeah. You been here long?" "6 months. 3rd job this year." "Why this one?" She shrugged. "I like food. I like helping people. But it's hard here." Before Sterling could ask more, Kevin stormed in, kicking a mop bucket out of his path. "Hope, what the hell are you doing? You think this is break time?" Sterling turned. Hope had sat down on a crate by the freezer, massaging her ankles. I just needed a second," she said quietly. "You don't sit unless you're on break. You know the rules. You want to rest, clock out." Sterling felt his blood rise. She looked pale. She was clearly in pain. "I've been on my feet for 6 hours," Hope said, still calm. "I just needed a minute." "You want to sit?" "Sit at home," Kevin snapped. "Get up or get out." Hope stood slowly, not saying another word. Her hands trembled as she reached for a tray. Kevin stormed off like it was nothing. Sterling grit his teeth. He wanted to say something, but he had to wait. He needed to see more. That night, after close, Hope stayed behind to help clean even though her shift had ended. Sterling offered to help. "You didn't have to stay," he said. "I did. Kevin won't say it, but we're always short one person. People keep quitting." "Why?" She hesitated. Then, "He's not the worst manager I've had, but he doesn't care. He talks down to us, doesn't help, just yells." Sterling nodded slowly. He'd seen enough to know this wasn't just one bad moment. He was going to stay the full week. And before it was over, Kevin was going to know exactly who Stan really was. Wednesday morning came colder than expected, the kind of Midwest chill that crept in through the back door hinges. Sterling showed up early again, 30 minutes before his scheduled shift. He wanted to see how the store opened, how prep was handled, and who showed up on time. Hope was already there, loading trays of pre-washed kale into the walk-in. She moved slower than the day before, favoring her right ankle, but didn't complain. She gave him a small nod as he walked in, then turned back to her task. Kevin showed up 15 minutes late, holding a half-eaten breakfast sandwich and a plastic cup of iced coffee. He didn't acknowledge either of them, just muttered something about traffic and disappeared into the office. The door clicked shut behind him. The first customer walked in at 8:30. By then, the line unit was only half-stocked. Hope had to run back and forth between the prep station and the front, trying to keep things moving. Sterling rotated in behind the counter to help assemble orders, even though Kevin hadn't assigned him there. No one stopped him. Mid-morning, a new employee named Luis came in for the midday shift. He looked barely 18, thin and nervous, wearing a green apron 2 sizes too big. Kevin came out of the office and looked him up and down without saying anything. "Clock in," Kevin said flatly. Luis nodded and fumbled with the POS tablet behind the counter. Kevin turned to Sterling. "Stan, you're doing backline today. I need someone who can keep up." Sterling didn't respond, just moved to the back line and kept working. He noticed Kevin didn't assign himself anywhere. He floated, watching more than doing. At one point, he spent nearly 20 minutes at the sidebar on his phone. When the lunch rush hit, Hope and Sterling were elbow-deep in salads, and Luis struggled to ring up orders fast enough. A middle-aged woman asked for no onions. Her bowl came out with onions. Luis apologized and offered to remake it. The woman rolled her eyes and walked out. Kevin appeared behind the counter a few seconds later. "What the hell was that?" I made it wrong," Luis stammered. "You think this is a game? You're gonna cost us another Yelp review." Luis blinked fast and looked down. Sterling cut in. "I saw the order. It was just a mistake." Kevin didn't even look at him. "You don't speak for him. Stay in your lane." Hope stopped mid-toss. "He was just trying to help." Kevin snapped his fingers at her. "You're not done with that order. Focus." By 2 o'clock, the rush died down. Sterling caught Hope leaning against the sink, eyes closed for a second too long. "You okay?" She opened her eyes slowly. "Didn't sleep. Closed last night. Opened this morning." He kept his voice low. "You didn't get a break?" I asked. "Kevin said we were too short." Sterling glanced around. There were only 4 people on the floor, including Kevin, who was once again in the office. "I'll cover for you. Go take 20. She hesitated. "He'll say something. I'll handle it." She looked at him, then walked to the break room out back. 2 minutes later, Kevin emerged from the office. "Where's Hope?" "She needed a break. Said she's been on since 6. I didn't approve that." "It's legal," Sterling said, wiping down the prep counter. "She's past 6 hours. Kevin stepped forward, voice dropping. "You don't decide when breaks happen." Sterling didn't move. "Neither do you. Labor laws do." Kevin stared at him for a second, then scoffed and walked away. By the evening, only 3 employees were left. Luis had left after his shift, and another worker named Tasha had called out sick. The dinner crowd was lighter, but the place was a mess. Trash bins overflowing, food bits on the floor, and half the dressing containers empty. Sterling watched Kevin go into the office again at 6:30. He didn't come out for the rest of the shift. Hope and Sterling closed together. She didn't complain, just worked in silence. When they finally locked up at 9, she looked at him and said, "You're different." "How so?" "You care if people fall over." He didn't know what to say to that. Thursday morning, Sterling arrived even earlier. He wanted to be there before Hope. He made coffee, wiped down the prep tables, and began organizing the delivery crates that had been dropped off overnight. Kevin showed up only 5 minutes late this time, but said nothing about the clean prep area. He just walked past and muttered something about the schedule. Sterling checked the rotation. Hope was scheduled for a double. Luis had been cut from Friday's shift, and today they were running with only 3 staff again. "Why is Luis off the schedule tomorrow?" Sterling asked casually. Didn't like his attitude. Too soft. Sterling kept his eyes on the prep board. "He's green. Just needs training." Kevin pulled a dry erase marker from his pocket and started crossing off prep items. "I don't have time to train every kid who walks in scared of customers. I need people who can handle pressure." Sterling waited until Kevin left the room, then stepped into the walk-in cooler. He dialed a number he hadn't used in months. Maria, the HR director he'd hired back when the company was still rebuilding. "Maria, it's Sterling. I'm at store 14. Don't tell anyone yet. I need you to check the turnover rate here for the last 8 months. Also, see how many complaints we've gotten, both internal and external." She didn't ask why. "Give me a few hours." Sterling hung up and returned to the floor. The lunch rush hit harder than the day before. A local gym must have finished a class, because a dozen people came in at once. Kevin disappeared again. Hope ran register. Sterling worked the counter. And Luis, who had come in on his own time to ask about his Friday shift, stepped in to help without being asked. Kevin reappeared at 1:30, sipping another iced coffee. "Where'd you get that?" Hope asked, glancing at the drink. He shrugged. "DoorDash. I needed a break." Sterling stared at him. "You left during the rush? I'm the manager. I don't need permission." Hope didn't say anything. Her jaw clenched slightly, but she kept her eyes on the counter. Later that afternoon, Maria called back. Sterling took the call outside next to the dumpster. "This store's lost 14 employees in the last 4 months, she said. "That's higher than any other location. And we've had 6 anonymous complaints about hostile management. All recent." Sterling nodded slowly. "Thanks. Keep this between us for now." When he came back inside, he found Luis putting away inventory that wasn't even his responsibility. Hope was cleaning the soda machine. Kevin was sitting on a crate near the back, staring at his phone. Sterling walked over. "Kevin, can we talk in the office?" Kevin looked up. "What for?" "5 minutes." He followed reluctantly, slouched into the office chair, and crossed his arms. "This isn't working," Sterling said. Kevin raised an eyebrow. "What isn't?" "You. Management. The way you treat staff. The way you disappear during rushes. The way you dismiss people who are trying." Kevin scoffed. "What, are you writing a performance review now? You're a temp." Sterling stood still, calm, cold. "I'm Sterling Grant." Kevin blinked. "The owner, CEO, founder of this company." Silence. "I've watched you ignore your team. I've watched you intimidate new hires. I've watched you disappear while others picked up your slack. This ends now." Kevin stood, flustered. "Look, I didn't know. I don't care if you knew. You acted this way because you thought no one was watching. That's worse." Sterling opened the door. "You're done here. Pack your things." Kevin didn't move. "I mean now." Kevin left without another word. Outside, Hope and Luis were wiping down trays. They both looked up when Kevin exited the building, keys in hand but no words on his lips. When Sterling came back in, neither spoke. He broke the silence. "I'm not Stan. My name is Sterling. I started this company out of a food truck. I believed in dignity and hard work. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what was happening on the ground." Hope set down her tray. "You fired him?" "Yes." She looked at Luis. He looked back at her. Neither smiled. They just stood straighter. "I'm staying for the rest of the week," Sterling said. "But when I leave, I'm not walking away again. Friday opened under a gray sky. The rain hadn't started, but the clouds hung low and heavy, matching the weight in Sterling's chest. He'd barely slept. Not from regret. Kevin's dismissal was non-negotiable, but from the sheer volume of decisions now pressing in. Removing a manager was only the beginning. What came next had to matter more. He arrived just before 6. Hope was already there, seated on a milk crate near the back door, holding a thermos in both hands. She looked up, startled, then relaxed when she recognized him not as Stan, but as the man who'd quietly stepped into the mess she'd been surviving. "Didn't think you'd come back," she said. "I said I would." She nodded once, then stood. "We're down to 3 today." Tasha called out again. Luis said he'd come in, even though it's not his day. Sterling followed her inside. The air smelled faintly of bleach and cold spinach. For a moment, the silence between them was enough. "You didn't have to cover for me yesterday," she said finally, "when you gave me that break." If Kevin had found out before. "I knew what I was doing. Still, thank you." Luis arrived 20 minutes later, pulling his sleeves down over his wrists as he stepped in. He looked surprised to see Sterling already behind the prep table. "You're still here. I will be all day." Luis glanced at Hope, unsure, but she simply started chopping cucumbers. No one questioned the new reality. By 8:30, they had the front fully stocked. It took longer than usual, but they moved with quiet coordination. Sterling had already called in a temporary shift lead from a nearby location. Nina, a veteran from Store 5, who arrived just before the doors opened. She was short, stone-faced, and all business. She didn't ask questions, just reviewed the prep board, nodded once, and started helping Hope portion toppings. The first customer walked in at 8:50, then another. By 9:15, there were already 7 people in the dining area. Friday mornings weren't usually this busy, but a local event had apparently brought in foot traffic early. Nina handled the register. Sterling and Hope worked the line. Luis floated between restocking and cleaning trays. There was no shouting. No one disappeared. Everything moved, slowly but steadily. 10. Sterling pulled Nina aside. "How's it feel?" She gave a small shrug. "Rough edges, but they're trying. That girl Hope, she listens. Learns fast." He nodded. "What about Luis?" "Still green, but he wants to be better." "Would you trust either of them with more responsibility?" Nina hesitated, then said, "Hope, yes. He's not ready yet." Sterling took that in. "Stay through the lunch rush. After that, I'll take it from there." By noon, the place was full. Gym goers, office workers, 2 families with young kids. The line reached the door twice. Nina directed traffic with short, clipped instructions. Hope adjusted to the pace without flinching. Luis made one mistake, handed out a bowl with the wrong dressing but corrected it immediately. At one point, a man in a navy windbreaker started growing impatient near the register. "Why's this taking so long?" he asked, voice too loud. Nina answered without turning. "We're short-staffed. Appreciate your patience." He grumbled but stayed in line. Hope never looked up. Her hands kept moving, fast but steady. Sterling watched her refill the roasted tofu bin without being asked. At 1:30, the rush finally broke. Nina stepped back from the counter, peeled off her gloves, and walked towards Sterling. "They'll be fine. I'll head back to my store. Thank you for stepping in." She gave him a look. "This place isn't broken. It just needs someone who cares." Sterling nodded. "We're working on it." After Nina left, Sterling gathered Hope and Luis in the break room. The door was slightly warped. It didn't close all the way, but it was quiet enough. "I need to ask both of you something," he said. "And I want you to answer honestly." Luis folded his hands in his lap. Hope stayed standing, arms crossed lightly. If we rebuild this store from the inside out, new training, better communication, real support, would you stay? Luis looked at the floor. If I knew someone had our backs, yeah. I like it here. I just didn't think anyone noticed when we tried. Sterling turned to Hope. She met his gaze. I didn't think anyone at the top even remembered we existed. He nodded once. You're not invisible. Not anymore. He let them go early that day. Not because the work was finished, there were still counters to wipe, containers to refill, but because they'd earned a breath. He stayed behind, cleaning the prep sink and reviewing order logs. At 5, a black SUV pulled into the alley behind the building. Maria stepped out, holding a clipboard and a sealed folder. She joined him through the back door. I pulled everything you asked for. Want to go over it now? Yes. They sat at a folding table near the mop closet. She handed over the folder. Staff turnover's been worst at this location. But Store 10 in Gary isn't far behind. Same patterns: high stress, bad morale, absentee management. He flipped through the pages. Is it just the managers? In most cases, yes. But there's also a gap in how we train new hires. A lot of them never get proper onboarding. They're thrown in and expected to swim. Fixing that starts now. There's something else, she said, lowering her voice. I found a complaint buried in the system from 5 weeks ago. It was about this store. Someone reported that an employee was told to clock out if she needed to sit, even though she had a medical condition. Sterling's jaw tightened. Was it Hope? Maria nodded. She didn't name Kevin directly. But the timing lines up. He closed the folder. That's already been addressed. But I want a formal apology in her file, and I want her record cleared. Maria nodded. Done. After she left, Sterling stayed alone in the back. The sun had dropped behind the buildings across the street, casting the prep area in soft gold light. He looked around at the empty space and thought of all the quiet damage that had gone unnoticed, all the people who had kept showing up despite it. He picked up a pen and scribbled out a rough schedule for the next 2 weeks. He added 2 new hires, one referred from Store 5, another from the temp agency. He wrote Hope's name next to shift lead training. He paused at Luis's name, then penciled in mentorship Nina. Before he left, he placed a sticky note on the freezer door. It read, "Back soon. Keep building." He didn't sign it. When he stepped outside, the clouds finally opened up. The rain came fast and clean. He pulled up his hood and started walking, not away, but forward. Tomorrow he'd be back. Not as Stan. Not as the CEO. Just as someone who finally saw what had been there all along. Saturday morning began without ceremony. The air was crisp, the sidewalks damp from the overnight rain. When Sterling arrived at Store 14 just before 7, the lights were already on. He unlocked the back door, stepped inside, and was greeted by the low hum of the prep cooler and the faint clang of someone stacking trays in the wash station. Hope stood near the back, hair pinned up, apron already tied. She was alone, moving methodically through the list taped to the side of the walk-in. Without looking up, she asked, "You bringing coffee again?" Sterling held up 2 cups. She took one, nodding once. Good. I wasn't sure that part of the new regime would stick. He smiled without responding. They stood for a moment in silence, sipping quietly as the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Hope set her cup down. Luis texted. He'll be in early. Said he wants to practice expo timing. Sterling raised an eyebrow. He always this eager? He said you talked to him yesterday. I think it landed. They got to work without talking much more. Hope handled the fresh-cut toppings, while Sterling took inventory of the dry storage, a task Kevin had neglected for weeks, judging by the mismatched labels and expired packets of sesame seeds. Luis arrived 10 minutes later, still tucking in his shirt as he walked through the back. He greeted them both with a quiet morning and immediately started prepping the warm proteins. By 9, the team was moving in sync. Sterling had sent a floater from Store 3 named Marcus, a calm, steady employee with 4 years of experience. He wasn't there to take over, just to help stabilize things while the new structure settled in. The doors opened at 9:30. A slow trickle of customers filtered in. A couple of students, a pair of nurses still in scrubs, and an elderly man who sat with a newspaper and ordered the same bowl he always did. Hope knew it by heart. Sterling handled the back line while Hope ran the register. Luis bounced between restocking and expo, adjusting where needed. For the first time all week, no one had to raise their voice to be heard. Just before 11, Sterling stepped outside to take a call from Maria. He stood beneath the awning, watching light drizzle fall across the alley. The compliance team reviewed Kevin's file, she said. Aside from what we already knew, there were 2 additional exit interviews from former staff. One mentioned favoritism. Another said he docked a worker's hours without warning. Document everything. I want a new policy in place by next week. No manager should have that kind of unchecked power. Already drafting it. He ended the call and stepped back inside. The warmth of the kitchen hit him immediately, along with the sharp, citrus scent of chopped herbs. Hope was mid-order with a customer when he passed through. She didn't pause or glance up. Her hands moved with practiced rhythm, her tone even but engaged. Sterling joined Marcus near the back, where they were reviewing the updated checklist Sterling had introduced the day before. Marcus tapped a box with his pen. You really want them doing this mid-shift? It's not about adding more, Sterling said. It's about building habits. If something's off, they catch it before it becomes a problem. Marcus nodded. Fair. These kids can handle it. Just never had anyone show them how. That afternoon, Sterling pulled Hope aside during a lull. She was wiping down the counter, her sleeves dusted with sesame seeds. I want to talk about next steps, he said. She straightened. Am I in trouble? Not even close. He handed her a folded paper. She opened it, read in silence, then glanced up. This is a shift lead schedule. Yes, starting next week with Nina shadowing you for 2 days. You'll get the training Kevin never offered. Full pay bump included. She didn't answer right away. Her expression didn't change, but her grip on the paper tightened slightly. I didn't ask for this. You earned it. She folded the paper again carefully. What about Luis? He's already on track. I've paired him with Marcus for the next few weeks. If he stays consistent, he'll move into a trainer role. She nodded once. Good. Sterling paused. You okay with this? I don't want to be a manager. You won't be. Not yet. But I need people who understand what this place should feel like. Not just how fast they can chop carrots. Hope slid the paper into her apron. I'll try not to screw it up. Try to own it instead. At 4, just before closing, a woman walked in wearing a charcoal blazer and carrying a clipboard. She introduced herself as Tanya from corporate operations. She'd come to perform a surprise evaluation, a real one this time. Sterling didn't interfere. He let her observe for 30 minutes, moving quietly through the store as Luis handled a complicated order and Marcus coached him through the timing. When Tanya finished, she pulled Sterling aside in the back. This is the most functional location I've seen this quarter, she said. It didn't look like this 2 weeks ago. It didn't feel like this either. You making this your model store? I'm making it my reminder. She nodded once, then left without further comment. By 5:30, the dining area was clean, the prep bins labeled and sealed, and the staff gathered near the front. Sterling stood with them, not above, not apart. I'm not going to give you a speech, he said. Just one thought. I built this company from a truck, and I thought I knew what every store needed. But I was wrong. What it needed was for me to listen better. No one clapped. No one needed to. He turned to Hope. "You're running the opener tomorrow?" She nodded. "Luis is on prep. Marcus is off." "Good. I'll swing by after 10. You showing up as Stan or the boss?" "Neither. Just someone who's still learning." She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. "Then bring coffee." "No decaf." "Deal." They locked up together, each checking a section before flipping the lights. When the last switch was pulled, the store settled into darkness, but it felt different now, more like a place that had survived a storm and was finally drying out. Sterling stepped into the parking lot alone. The sky had cleared. The wind had picked up, but it wasn't cold anymore, just sharp enough to keep him awake. He didn't get into his car right away. He stood for a moment, watching the streetlights buzz into life, one by one. It had taken too long to see what was happening under his own roof. But now that he wouldn't look away again. Not ever.